The night felt different, but I couldn't put my finger on why. The kind of night where everything seems off, but doesn't quite register until it's too late. I wasn't looking for trouble, and I certainly wasn't expecting it, but life has a funny way of catching you when you least expect it. I was sitting in the kitchen, the lights dimmed, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I had just finished cleaning up after dinner. It had been a routine night, nothing special. My wife, Annabelle, was in the other room, finishing up some work. I couldn't remember the last time we'd actually had a real conversation, but that was nothing new. We were two people who were comfortable in our silence, sharing the same space without needing to say much. The rhythm of our life had become predictable, like a song that no longer resonated but was still pleasant enough to listen to. But something had changed recently. I couldn't explain it. Annabelle had become a little quieter, a little more distant, and while I didn't mind the quiet, I did mind the lack of warmth. It wasn't just the conversations that had slowed down. It was her smile, the glimmer in her eyes when she saw me after a long day. Those small things that you take for granted, the little signals that tell you everything's okay. They weren't there anymore. Still, I didn't say anything. I had a tendency to avoid confrontation. If something was wrong, I thought, it would eventually reveal itself, and I'd deal with it when the time came. I wasn't the kind of person to dig into things that made me uncomfortable. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was laziness, but I preferred the peace of ignorance over the messiness of reality. That night, as I cleaned the dishes, Annabelle came into the kitchen and stood by the doorway, watching me for a moment. I noticed that she wasn't wearing the dress she had worn earlier that day, the one I had complimented her on. Instead, she was dressed in something more casual, something I hadn't seen her wear in a while. There was something different about her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. "Hey, I'm heading out," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'll be back late. Don't wait up." I paused, turning to look at her. "Out?" I asked, feeling a twinge of surprise. "Where are you going?" She hesitated, as if the question caught her off guard. "Just out. With some friends," she added, her words carefully measured. "Friends?" I thought. Who? Who were these friends? I tried to brush it off. I wasn't the jealous type. But there was something about her tone that felt off, like she wasn't telling me the whole story. It wasn't the first time she'd gone out without me, but this time felt different. I couldn't put it into words, but the feeling lingered. "Okay," I said, forcing a smile. "Have fun." She didn't answer immediately, just stood there for a moment, as if deciding whether to say something else. But then she just nodded and walked out the door, leaving me alone in the quiet of the house. The door clicked shut behind her, and for a few moments, I stood frozen, staring at the space where she had been. It wasn't like her to be vague. She had always been open with me before. But tonight felt strange. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Still, I didn't follow her, didn't call her back. I simply went about my evening, trying to convince myself that it was all in my head. As the night wore on, I found myself getting lost in the emptiness of our home. The quiet was suffocating, and I kept glancing at the clock, counting the hours until she would return. At one point, I even considered calling her to check in, but something stopped me. Maybe it was pride, or maybe I just didn't want to seem too eager, too suspicious. But then I heard it. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. A text. From Annabelle. "I'll be home in about an hour. Got a little caught up. Don't wait up, though." I frowned. Caught up? What did that mean? And the "don't wait up" part. It sounded so final, like she was closing off any possibility of me being involved in whatever was happening. I stared at the text for a long time, feeling a strange mix of confusion and unease. The words, the tone, there was something about it that didn't sit right. I felt a knot forming in my stomach, but I still didn't say anything. I didn't respond. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just me reading into things. But it was then that I made the mistake. I picked up the phone and typed out a message, one that, in hindsight, I would regret more than anything. "Everything okay? You seem distant lately. Where are you really?" I didn't mean for it to sound accusatory. I didn't mean to suggest that something was off. But as soon as I hit send, I realized that I had crossed a line. In trying to express my concern, I had unwittingly made myself sound insecure, suspicious even. The minutes that followed felt like an eternity. I waited for her reply, but nothing came. Not a word. The silence between us felt heavier than it ever had before. And then the door opened. Annabelle was home. But she wasn't the same person who had left hours earlier. Annabelle stepped through the door, and for a split second, I couldn't even recognize her. The way she moved was different, almost mechanical. Her steps were slow, deliberate, as if she was carefully calculating each movement. She closed the door softly behind her, her eyes avoiding mine the moment she entered the room. I stood there, unsure of what to say. Was I imagining things? I had sent her that text, and now she was home later than expected. The silence in the room stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. She took off her coat, and when she turned to face me, I could see that her eyes were shadowed, as if something had drained the light from them. The smile she gave me was faint, almost forced. "Hi," she said softly, her voice a little too soft, like she was trying to make herself smaller. "Sorry I'm late. Got caught up." "Yeah, you mentioned that in your text," I replied, trying to keep my tone light, though my stomach was a tight knot. "Everything okay?" She nodded quickly, but the way she looked at me was distant. There was something else there, something hidden. I could tell she was trying to hide it, but the effort was transparent. She moved past me, walking towards the kitchen, her movements stiff and almost robotic. I stood frozen for a moment, watching her. What was going on? Why was everything so off tonight? "Are you hungry?" she asked, her voice breaking the silence. It was an innocent question, but there was a strange undertone to it, like she was asking just to fill the space between us. I nodded, though I wasn't really hungry. The food didn't matter. It wasn't about the meal, it was about her. The way she was acting, the way she was avoiding my gaze. "I'm not really hungry," I said, my words sounding strange even to me. "Just tell me what's going on, Annabelle." She paused, her back to me, and for a moment, I thought she might actually open up. But instead, she let out a sigh, long and tired. Then, she turned back towards me, her face unreadable. "There's nothing to tell," she said, her voice a little sharper now, as if she was irritated by my persistence. "Everything is fine." I could feel my chest tighten as her words settled in. She had never been this dismissive before. It was like she was deliberately keeping something from me. But why? What had happened in those hours she was gone? Where had she really been? I knew I had to ask more questions, but the fear of pushing her further away stopped me from doing so. Still, the silence between us was unbearable. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, something irreversible. "I'm just worried about you, that's all," I said, my voice softer now, trying to sound more reassuring. Annabelle's expression softened for a brief moment, but then it was gone, replaced with that distant look again. "I'm fine," she repeated a little too quickly. "You don't need to worry about me. You're overthinking it." The words stung, though I couldn't quite explain why. Maybe it was the finality in her voice, or maybe it was the way she said it, as if she was trying to convince herself more than me. Something wasn't adding up. My instincts were screaming at me, telling me that there was more to the story. But I was still frozen in place, unsure of how to approach the situation without making things worse. She walked past me to the living room, her footsteps faint on the hardwood floor. I followed her, though my heart wasn't in it. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to push me away. She settled on the couch, her eyes glued to the television, though it seemed like she wasn't really watching. I stood there for a moment, contemplating my next move. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating, and I knew that if I didn't say something, I might lose her completely. "Annabelle," I said quietly, taking a step toward her. She didn't respond, not at first. But then, slowly, she turned her head, her eyes meeting mine with a tired, almost apologetic look. "Please," I continued, my voice faltering slightly. "Talk to me. Something's off. I know you're hiding something." She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine, as if trying to decide whether to tell me the truth. The seconds ticked by, and the silence between us grew heavier. Finally, she let out a deep breath and turned back to the television, her fingers idly tracing the remote control in her hand. "I'm not hiding anything," she said, but her words lacked conviction. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." I could feel my frustration building. The more she dismissed me, the more I knew something was wrong. And just as I was about to push further, just as I was about to confront her with the questions burning in my mind, my phone buzzed. It was a text, from a number I didn't recognize. It was short and to the point. "I hope she doesn't find out." My blood ran cold. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. Who was this? And what did they mean by that? Was it a mistake? Was it some sort of sick joke? Or was it something more? Before I could even react, Annabelle's voice broke through my thoughts, cold and sharp. "Who's that?" she asked, her gaze now fixed on my phone. Her tone had changed completely, the warmth in her voice replaced with something colder, something I couldn't quite place. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like a stranger in my own home. And then, everything changed. I stared at the phone in my hand, the text still sitting there, taunting me. I couldn't make sense of it. My heart raced, and the air in the room suddenly felt thick, like I couldn't breathe. I hope she doesn't find out. The words lingered in my mind, like an echo, too loud and too clear. The fact that the message came from an unknown number made it even more unsettling. Who was this? Why was someone sending me this? What did it even mean? Annabelle's gaze was fixed on the phone, and there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something dark, almost like fear, but she quickly masked it. She took a step closer to me, her expression unreadable, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. "Who's texting you at this hour?" she asked, her voice calm, but laced with something I couldn't quite identify. She didn't wait for me to answer. Instead, she reached for the phone, her fingers brushing mine in a way that felt like an accusation. The movement was too quick, too rehearsed. I pulled my hand back instinctively, but the moment passed in an instant. She didn't seem fazed by it at all. "Who is it?" Her eyes bore into mine, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her. Something was off. I wanted to tell her the truth, to ask her who this could possibly be, but I didn't know if I could trust her anymore. The message, the way she was acting. I could feel the pieces of the puzzle starting to slip into place, but I was terrified of what I might find. "I don't know," I finally said, my voice betraying me. "It's just some random number. I don't recognize it." Annabelle didn't respond right away. Instead, she seemed to study me, her eyes scanning my face like she was searching for something, some sign that would give her away. And for a moment, it felt like time stopped. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, until finally, she turned away, walking toward the kitchen without another word. I couldn't believe how quickly she moved, how effortlessly she avoided the confrontation. It was like she had done this 100 times before, and I hated the way it made me feel. I should have followed her, should have pressed her for answers. But I didn't. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the weight of the text and the look in her eyes keeping me in place. Moments later, Annabelle returned, but this time, there was something different about her. She was holding a glass of wine, but her hands were trembling ever so slightly. She noticed I was watching her, but she didn't say anything. She simply took a sip, the wine swirling in the glass like a gentle reminder of just how far apart we had grown in such a short time. "Are you okay?" I asked again, my voice quieter this time, almost pleading. I didn't want to sound desperate, but I could feel my control slipping. "You're acting strange, Annabelle. You've been acting strange for weeks now. Please, just tell me what's going on." Her eyes hardened for a moment, and I saw something flicker in them, something I hadn't seen before. It was like she was weighing her options, deciding whether to keep up the charade or finally come clean. I held my breath, waiting for her to speak, but when she did, her words were colder than I expected. "I told you before, everything is fine," she said, her voice clipped sharp. "You're imagining things." I felt my blood run cold. That response, it didn't sound like her. It was like she was hiding something, something she didn't want me to know. I couldn't let it go. "Are you seeing someone else?" The question was out before I could stop it, and as soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted it. I hadn't meant to accuse her outright, but the way she was acting. I needed to know if I was just being paranoid or if something real was happening. She froze, the glass of wine still in her hand, the faintest tremor in her fingers. Her eyes locked on mine, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something raw in her gaze, something that almost made me take a step back. "Why would you ask that?" she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her tone was softer now, but the underlying tension was still there. She was fighting something. I could see it in the way she shifted her weight, in the way her gaze avoided mine for just a split second. "I don't know," I admitted, my heart pounding in my chest. I've been feeling like you're pulling away from me, Annabelle. You're not the person I married anymore." The room seemed to shrink, the silence growing thicker as her eyes flickered between anger and something else, something I couldn't name. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said quietly, almost to herself. She turned away, looking out the window, as if she needed distance. as if my words were suffocating her. I wanted to push her further, to make her admit whatever it was she was hiding, but the sight of her standing there, so distant, was enough to silence me. The phone buzzed again. This time, the message was clearer. You need to stop asking questions. It's too late now. I froze. My hand trembled as I stared at the screen. The text wasn't from the same number. This one came from one I recognized, someone from Annabelle's past. Someone she had kept in touch with, but never really talked about. The name didn't mean anything to me at first, but now, it felt like a slap in the face. I looked up at her, my mind racing. What's going on, Annabelle? I said, my voice shaking now, a mix of frustration and fear. What's really happening? Annabelle turned to face me then, her eyes hard and cold. There was no warmth left in her. I told you. It's nothing. Stop looking for something that isn't there. But I knew better now. The message, the secrecy, the way she had acted tonight, it all pointed to something bigger, something that I had ignored for far too long. I was done pretending I didn't know. And she knew it. The tension in the room was unbearable. Every second felt like a weight pressing down on me, suffocating the air around us. I couldn't tell if I was imagining it, but it felt like the very walls of our house were closing in. Annabelle stood there, her face unreadable, her posture rigid, as if she were waiting for me to make the next move. But what was the next move? What was the truth? What was I missing? I stared at the phone in my hand, the message burning into my mind. You need to stop asking questions. It's too late now. The words played over and over again in my head, but no matter how many times I read them, I couldn't make sense of it. What did it mean? What had I missed? I glanced up at Annabelle, who was still standing by the window, her back to me. She hadn't moved an inch since the text came through. She was waiting for me to speak, waiting for me to make the first move, to say something that would either change everything or break us. I could feel the power shift. The ball was no longer in my court. I didn't want to push her too far. I didn't want to hear the truth if it meant tearing apart everything I thought I knew about our relationship. But I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. Annabelle, I said, my voice shaking slightly as I stepped closer. What is going on? Why are you lying to me? You're hiding something. Please, just tell me the truth. She turned slowly, her eyes narrowing as if she were sizing me up, deciding how much of the truth to reveal, how much of herself she was willing to expose. It wasn't the look of someone who had nothing to hide. It was the look of someone who had already made their choice, someone who was protecting a secret they weren't ready to let go of. I'm not lying to you, she replied, her voice tight, almost defensive. You're just overthinking things. You always do this. She took a deep breath, her eyes flitting away for just a moment before locking onto mine again. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Her words were like daggers, but I wasn't about to back down. I had already let her pull away too many times without asking the questions that needed to be asked. I wasn't going to let her dismiss me like this anymore. I don't care about how hard it is, I said, the frustration in my voice growing. I just want to know what's going on. Are you seeing someone else? Is that it? For a moment, Annabelle didn't say anything. The silence between us was deafening, the air thick with unspoken words. I could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of the question hanging in the air like a storm about to break. And then, she spoke. It's not that simple, Theo, she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. I didn't want to hurt you. The way she said my name, with that certain heaviness, sent a chill down my spine. The words hung in the air, as if they were meant to be a warning, but I couldn't quite grasp what they meant. What was she trying to tell me? You don't need to protect me, Annabelle, I said, my voice barely a whisper now. If there's something going on, just tell me. I can't keep living in this uncertainty. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes flickering with something that looked like regret, but then it was gone, replaced by something colder. She turned her back to me once more, walking away as if she couldn't bear to face me any longer. Maybe you're right, she said quietly, her voice almost lost in the sound of the night air drifting in through the window. Maybe you do deserve to know, but I don't think you're ready for what I have to say. I felt my heart lurch. What was she talking about? What could possibly be so bad that she couldn't even look me in the eye while saying it? What do you mean? I asked, my voice cracking slightly as I stepped closer to her. Annabelle, please. She turned to face me, her eyes finally meeting mine. There was something different in her gaze, something that made me freeze. It was a look of finality, A look that said everything I had been ignoring was about to come crashing down on me. You don't know everything, Theo, she said softly, her voice barely audible. There's more to me than you realize. More than you could ever understand. I took a step back, my mind racing. What was she talking about? Who was this woman standing in front of me? And why did it feel like I didn't even know her anymore? I don't understand, I muttered, my voice shaky. What do you mean? What's going on? Annabelle sighed deeply, her gaze falling to the floor. I didn't want to hurt you, she repeated, almost as if she was trying to convince herself of that. But now you have to know the truth. She paused, and I could feel my breath catch in my throat. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me to turn away, to run, to ignore the pain that was inevitably coming. But I couldn't. I had to hear it. I've been seeing someone else, she finally said, her voice breaking. The words seemed to hang in the air, suspended in time, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. It was like the world had stopped turning, and the only thing that mattered was the pain in those words. Who? I managed to choke out, my throat dry, my hands shaking. Who is he? Her eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't look away. It doesn't matter, Theo. It was never about him. It was about me. I've been lost for a long time. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond to something that was so raw, so utterly devastating. All I could do was stand there, frozen, as the world around me crumbled. You're not the man I married anymore, she said, her voice barely audible. I've been living in a fog for so long, and I couldn't keep pretending like everything was okay. I couldn't keep lying to you, or to myself. Her words hit me like a freight train. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight. My world, the one I thought I understood, was shattered. Annabelle wasn't the person I thought she was. She wasn't the woman I loved. She was someone else entirely, someone I had never truly known. And in that moment, everything changed. The words hung in the air like smoke, and I felt like I was drowning in them. I've been seeing someone else. Annabelle's confession echoed in my mind, repeating over and over like a cruel mantra. My legs suddenly felt weak, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse right there on the floor. How could this be happening? How could she be saying this? This wasn't the woman I knew. It couldn't be. I stood there, frozen, not knowing how to react. Anger, confusion, pain. Every emotion crashed into me like a wave, and I was left struggling to stay afloat. Annabelle was crying now, tears streaking down her face, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. She had shattered something irreplaceable. She had lied to me. She had betrayed me. You've been seeing someone else? I repeated, the words tasting like acid on my tongue. My voice was raw, shaking with the weight of the disbelief I couldn't shake. For how long, Annabelle? How long has this been going on? She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were filled with guilt, but there was something else there too. Regret. Maybe, but also resignation. Like she had already made her peace with it, like she had already decided that this was the end. It doesn't matter how long, Theo. What matters is that it happened. And I'm sorry. I really am. I shook my head, struggling to breathe through the sharp pain in my chest. Sorry? I repeated, the word coming out like a bitter laugh. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't undo what you've done. You've been lying to me for God knows how long, Annabelle. How am I supposed to believe anything you say now? She stepped closer, her eyes pleading, but I couldn't bring myself to let her touch me. Every part of me wanted to run, to get away from this nightmare, but I was rooted in place. I never meant for it to go this far, she said, her voice cracking. It wasn't about him. It was about me, about us. I lost myself, Theo. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to come back. Stop it. The words exploded from me. How long have you been hiding this? And who is he? Who the hell is the guy that's been making you feel more alive than I ever could? Her face contorted in a mixture of guilt and frustration. It's not like that. It's not just about him. It's about me feeling lost. I thought I could fix things. I thought maybe if I kept pretending, I could keep the pieces together. But I was wrong. I was so wrong, and I hate myself for it. I couldn't stop the anger from rising now. I couldn't stop the fury that surged through me like a tidal wave. You hate yourself for this? You hate yourself for cheating on me? I laughed, but it wasn't funny. The laughter came out hollow, bitter. That's supposed to make me feel better? You're destroying everything we've built, Annabelle. Everything we were. It's all falling apart, and all you've got is, I'm sorry? She was shaking her head, the tears flowing freely now, but I couldn't bring myself to feel anything but anger. I wanted answers, not apologies. I wanted to know why this was happening, why I was standing here, crushed by the woman I loved. Tell me who he is. Please, Annabelle. I need to know. I deserve to know. She hesitated, like the name on the tip of her tongue was a forbidden secret she wasn't ready to share. And then, in the quietest voice I had ever heard her use, she whispered, "His name is Mark." Mark. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Mark. The guy who had always been in the background, the one I had heard her mention a few times over the years, but never thought anything of. The one she'd always described as just a friend. I couldn't believe it. The puzzle pieces were starting to fall into place, but it didn't make it any easier to understand. Mark wasn't just a friend. He had been something else entirely. Something that had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. I felt sick to my stomach. The betrayal, the lies. How could she have kept this from me for so long? Why didn't you just tell me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper now, the weight of everything crashing down on me. Why keep it hidden? Why keep lying? She didn't look at me. Instead, she took a few shaky steps back, her hands trembling as she wiped her tears away. I was afraid, Theo. I was afraid of losing you. I was afraid of what would happen if I told you the truth. I took a deep breath, trying to control the rage that was bubbling up inside me. I wanted to scream at her, to make her feel the weight of what she had done. But something inside me knew that wouldn't help. Nothing would fix this. Nothing would make it better. So you thought it was better to cheat? To keep everything a secret? I shook my head. You've broken everything, Annabelle. She stepped toward me again, her face a mixture of guilt and sorrow. I know I've ruined everything. I know that. But I didn't want to hurt you, Theo. I thought if I stayed, I could fix it, but I couldn't. I couldn't fix myself. The words stung, and for a moment, I almost wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was some twisted cry for help, that there was a part of her that still cared, still wanted to make things right. But I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to trust her again. The silence that followed felt suffocating, and I found myself at a loss for words. How do you process something like this? How do you move forward when everything you thought was real has turned out to be a lie? I need time, I said, my voice low and steady. I didn't look at her as I spoke. I need time to figure this out. I can't do this right now. Annabelle didn't respond. She simply nodded, her shoulders slumping with defeat. She turned away and left the room without a word, her footsteps fading into the distance. I stood there in the middle of our living room, the weight of her words still hanging in the air. The betrayal, the broken trust, everything felt shattered, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. How could I ever trust her again? How could I ever believe in us after all of this? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. Things would never be the same. The silence in the house was suffocating. I could hear nothing but the sound of my own breathing, the way my heart pounded in my chest, the way my thoughts raced faster than I could process. I stood there in the middle of the living room, the weight of what Annabelle had just confessed crushing me. Everything felt like it was slipping through my fingers, like the very foundation of my world had crumbled beneath me, and I was standing on the edge of a cliff, too stunned to move. I couldn't comprehend how this had all happened. How had we gotten here? How had the woman I thought I knew, the woman I thought I loved, become a stranger in the blink of an eye? Mark. The name echoed in my mind over and over, but it didn't make sense. She had always insisted he was just a friend, just a guy from work, a colleague. But now, the truth was staring me in the face, and it was so much uglier than I could have ever imagined. I didn't know how long I stood there, lost in my thoughts, before I finally snapped out of it. I couldn't stay in this house any longer, not like this. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, and every corner of the place reminded me of what I had lost, of the trust one had given her, of the promises she had broken. I grabbed my jacket and walked out the front door without a second thought. The cool night air hit me like a slap in the face, but it was a relief. I needed the fresh air, the space to think, to clear my head. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. I just needed to get away from the house, away from everything that had been suffocating me for the past few hours. The streets were quiet, the only sound the distant hum of traffic, the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. It was late, too late to be out, really, but I didn't care. My mind was a whirlwind, and nothing made sense. My emotions were on fire. Betrayal, hurt, anger. And somewhere beneath it all, I could feel a cold numbness settling in. This wasn't the life I had signed up for. This wasn't the future I had envisioned. I ended up in the park. The same park I used to walk through with Annabelle, hand in hand, when everything felt simple and right. It was empty now, the benches sitting abandoned under the dim lights of the street lamps. The world seemed frozen in time, and I hated it. Everything felt frozen. I sat down on one of the benches, my mind racing. The more I thought about what Annabelle had said, the more it felt like a cruel joke. She hadn't just cheated on me. She had been hiding a part of herself, a part one hadn't seen or known about for all these years. Mark wasn't just a casual fling. She had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. I didn't know how to process that. How could someone so close to you, someone you trusted with everything, betray you in such a way? I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. For a moment, I didn't want to check it. I didn't want to hear anything from Annabelle, but I knew I had to. I pulled the phone out and saw her name flash across the screen. "Please, Theo," the text read. "I know I've hurt you, but I need to talk. Please don't shut me out." I stared at the words, feeling a deep sense of frustration wash over me. She was asking me for more? After everything? After all the lies, the betrayal, the deception? I didn't want to respond. I didn't want to open that door again, but at the same time, part of me, some small, foolish part of me, still wanted to hear her out, to understand. Maybe it was because I loved her, maybe it was because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't. I typed a response, but stopped before sending it. What was I even going to say? What could I say that would make any of this make sense? I could feel the rage bubbling up inside me again, and I knew if I let it out, it would destroy everything. I put the phone down and took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. The truth was, I was scared. Scared of the idea of losing everything. Scared of facing the reality that the woman I thought I knew had been living a lie. And, worst of all, I was scared of having to make a decision, one that could change the course of my life forever. I stood up abruptly, needing to move, needing to do something to get the chaos in my mind under control. I started walking aimlessly through the park, my thoughts a blur. I needed answers, but I didn't even know where to start looking. The truth was, I didn't know if I could trust her again. How could I? How could I ever go back to what we had before? I wanted to scream, to throw something, to break something. But there was no one around, no one to hear me. I was completely alone in this mess that had become my life. I found myself standing at the edge of the park, looking out at the empty streets. I could see the faint glow of the streetlights in the distance, but everything felt distant. Everything felt far away. I didn't know what to do, where to go, or how to fix this. I thought about going home, about facing Annabelle, but a part of me knew it wouldn't do any good. Not right now. Not after everything that had been said. I needed space. Time to think. Time to figure out what I wanted. I couldn't make a decision now. Not with my emotions running wild. Not with everything still raw. But I knew one thing for sure. The life I had known was over. There was no going back to how things were before. The question now wasn't whether I could forgive her. The question was whether I could forgive myself for letting it get this far. I walked away from the park, away from the house, away from everything. I didn't know what the future held, but I couldn't stay in the past any longer. The days that followed felt like a blur. Time seemed to stretch and warp, each minute dragging longer than the last. I could feel myself drowning in my own thoughts, trapped in a whirlwind of confusion, anger, and betrayal. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Annabelle, the woman I thought I knew, the woman I thought I loved, standing there, telling me she had been seeing someone else. I couldn't escape it. Every corner of the house, every place I walked through, reminded me of what I had lost. The memory of her voice, the touch of her hand, the way she used to smile at me in the mornings, it all felt like a cruel joke now. I hadn't just lost trust in her, I had lost the very idea of who she was. The woman I had built my life with, the one I had shared my dreams with, had turned into a stranger in the blink of an eye, and it hurt more than I could have ever imagined. I tried to avoid her. I stayed away from the house as much as possible, telling myself I needed time to think, to clear my head. But every time I saw her, whether it was a text, a phone call, or a moment when she caught my eye, I felt like a part of me was being pulled back into the chaos. She wanted to talk, wanted to explain, but I couldn't bring myself to listen. I wasn't ready for her explanations. Not yet. I didn't want to hear her tell me how sorry she was, how she never meant for it to happen. None of it would matter. It wouldn't change the fact that she had destroyed something irreplaceable. But then came the day when I couldn't run anymore. I had been at the park again, walking aimlessly, when my phone buzzed. I checked it reluctantly, not wanting to see her name, but knowing I had to. It was a message from Annabelle. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Theo." It started, the words blunt and straightforward. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for one last chance. Please, let me explain in person. I need you to know everything. I owe you that much." The message lingered on the screen, and I stared at it, my heart pounding in my chest. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't beg. It was a plea for closure, for understanding. And for a moment, I almost wanted to give it to her. I wanted to hear her side, to hear the words that had been building up inside her for so long. But there was a hesitation, a fear, deep down that kept me from responding. What if hearing her out only made it worse? What if it shattered whatever was left of the relationship? What if, after all the pain, I couldn't handle the truth? I sat on the bench, staring at the phone, fighting the urge to pick it up and reply. My hands trembled. I wanted to be angry, wanted to yell, wanted to tell her everything that was on my mind. But at the same time, I felt something else. Something softer. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was the smallest shred of hope that things could be fixed if I gave her a chance to explain. But could I really forgive her? Could I really look at her again the same way? I thought about Mark, about the way she had betrayed me. And then I thought about what we had built, about the life we shared. Was it all a lie? Or was there something salvageable? I stood up, making my way back to the apartment, the weight of the decision pressing on my chest. My mind raced with every possible outcome. Could I trust her again? Could I trust myself to make the right decision? By the time I reached the door, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep running. I couldn't hide from the truth. If I was going to move on, I needed to hear her out. I needed to know everything, even if it meant facing the raw pain I had been avoiding. I stepped inside, the familiar scent of our home hitting me like a punch to the gut. Annabelle was sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. She looked at me with a mixture of relief and fear. I hadn't seen her like this before. It was as if she was waiting for me to make the choice, to either walk away or listen. "I'm here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure what I was feeling anymore. Maybe I was numb. Maybe I just didn't want to regret not hearing her out. "Tell me everything. No more lies." She nodded, her face crumpling as tears welled up in her eyes. She took a deep breath, gathering herself, before she started speaking. "It wasn't supposed to happen, Theo," she said, her voice shaking. "I never planned for any of this. I didn't want it to go this far." I listened intently as she explained everything. She told me about Mark, the friendship that had turned into something more, something she never intended to let happen. She told me about how she had felt disconnected, how she had been struggling with herself long before I ever suspected anything. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, the words coming out in a broken sob. "But I lost myself. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to come back to you." I sat there, processing everything she said. It didn't excuse what she had done, but I could hear the truth in her voice. I could hear the pain, the regret. She wasn't just apologizing. She was telling me the truth, the whole truth. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was hearing the woman I had once known, the woman who had been honest, who had shared her struggles with me. But as much as I wanted to believe her, as much as I wanted to fix everything, I couldn't ignore the hurt. The betrayal was too deep, too raw. The trust that had once been the foundation of our relationship had shattered, and I didn't know if I could rebuild it. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said, my voice barely a whisper, the words tasting like gravel in my mouth. "I don't know if I can trust you again." She nodded, understanding, her eyes full of guilt and sorrow. "I know, Theo. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't expect it. I just wanted you to know the truth." I sat there for a long time, the silence between us heavy with the weight of everything we had just said. My mind was a battlefield, torn between the love I still felt for her and the pain she had caused. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I could move past this. But what I did know was that I couldn't make this decision in one night. It wasn't something that could be fixed overnight. It would take time, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. I wasn't sure if I was ready to fight for something that might never be the same again. The question wasn't whether I could forgive her. It was whether I could forgive myself for staying in something that had already broken. The choice wasn't as simple as I thought. The road ahead was uncertain, and I wasn't sure which direction to take. But for now, I knew I had to take a step back and breathe. The days that followed were a blur of quiet conversations and long, painful silences. Annabelle and I didn't rush into fixing things. It wasn't about pretending everything could go back to the way it was. It couldn't. But somewhere deep inside, I knew that I couldn't keep running from her either. I couldn't run from the love we had once shared, and I couldn't ignore the glimmer of hope that we could find our way back, even if it meant rebuilding from the ground up. We started small. It wasn't dramatic. There were no grand apologies or desperate confessions. It was just us, sitting in the living room, talking about our past, our mistakes, and the things that we had never said out loud before. Annabelle told me everything, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I listened without interrupting, without questioning. I let her explain the pain she had been carrying for so long. I didn't try to fix her or the situation. I simply listened, as hard as it was to hear the truth. And somewhere in that space, I realized that I wasn't the only one who had been lost. She had lost herself, too. We had both been drifting, pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. It wasn't an excuse, but it was a reason. And sometimes, that's all you need to start understanding. A week later, I found myself at the park again, the same place where I had spent so many hours thinking, trying to make sense of everything. Annabelle was beside me this time, and the quiet between us was no longer filled with tension. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was a beginning, a small step forward after everything that had happened. "I'm sorry, Theo," she said quietly, looking at the ground as we walked. "I never meant to hurt you, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right, if you'll let me." I didn't respond right away. There was still a part of me that was hesitant, still a part that wasn't sure if I could fully trust her again. But when I looked at her, really looked at her, I saw something different. She wasn't just the woman who had betrayed me. She was the woman who had owned up to her mistakes, who had worked to heal herself, who was fighting for us. And that meant more to me than I ever thought possible. "I don't know what the future holds, Annabelle," I said, my voice steady but uncertain. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to try if you are." She stopped walking and turned to face me, her eyes filled with hope. I am Theo. I want this. I want us." And in that moment, I felt a shift inside me. It wasn't the sudden rush of happiness that I had expected. It wasn't some grand moment of triumph. It was just peace. A quiet understanding that we weren't perfect, but we were both willing to put in the effort to make things right. We were both willing to forgive, not just each other, but ourselves. As we walked back towards the car, our hands brushed, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't pull away. There was no grand gesture, no perfect moment, just the simple act of holding hands, of walking through life together again, even if the path was uncertain. Things weren't going to be perfect. We both knew that. But we had each other, and that was enough to begin rebuilding. We had a second chance, not at recreating the past, but at making a new future, one step at a time. And as I looked at Annabelle, the woman who had once been a stranger and was now, once again, becoming my partner, I knew that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something better.